What changes should we expect in U.S. policy towards Central Asia and Kazakhstan under the new administration of Donald Trump? That's what we'll discuss with our foreign policy expert Iskander Akılbayev, who joins us in the studio today. Iskander, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Iskander, let me start with this question. We know that this is the final term of Donald Trump as the President of the United States, and during his campaign he made wide range of promises. Does it mean that in his second and final term he will act more decisively, not only in domestic issues, but in foreign policy as well?
Historically, the U.S. presidents, if they are elected for the second term, they are much more decisive. And certainly we know the style of President Donald Trump, and what he pays attention to. Trade, investment, energy, resources. At the same time, he's much more proactive on the regional foreign policy, specifically talking about the statements about Greenland and Mexico and the Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico. So we hear that he's very much bold enough to make such kind of statements. At the same time, we see that he made some red lines on the domestic issues, on the illegal migrants, etc. So we see that the first 100 days of President Trump is going to very much active and interesting.
Let's go more into details. We know that recently during the U.S. Senate hearings on confirmation of Marco Rubio as the Secretary of State, Senator Steve Daines raised the issue of repealing the Jackson-Vanik Amendment for Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Before we discuss it, could you please explain to our viewers the essence of this amendment?
Well, the Jackson-Vanik Amendment is actually the relic of the past. It was accepted and ratified in 1974, and it was used against the Soviet Union at that time, and it was accepted and ratified due to in order to allow the free migration of mostly the Jewish community from the Soviet Union to abroad. So that was used as a pretext of that time. But we have like 30 years, almost more than 30 years passed after dissolution of Soviet Union, and certainly even so, Jackson-Vanik Amendment has much more symbolic implications, but at the same time it gives some bad image or negative image towards countries, former Soviet Union countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. So in this respect, I think that the progress Kazakhstan has made within this bilateral economic, business and trade relations and foreign policy and diplomatic relations with U.S. partners, I think is very much important, that it doesn't reflect the true nature of the strategic partnerships that we have with the United States. So I think that the Senator Rubio, his statement in the Senate, I think it's very much important. And
Senator
I think
Daines, you mean?
Yes, and his replies to Senator Daines, I think it's very much important, and it gives a clear message to the Central Asian audience and partners that we are ready to step up towards new partnerships and expand the horizons of U.S.-Kazakhstan relations, be it in trade, business, energy, and diplomatic framework.
Do you think that the new administration will repeal this amendment?
Well, I think it's plausible, but it's certainly not guaranteed. You understand that the U.S. Domestic politics is very much complex, but I think it's very much plausible. The point is what the next stage that will be applied in the Kazakhstan-U.S. relations, just in case if it's repealed and we don't have this Cold War amendment anymore. The most important thing, what's the next stage? And what kind of agreements and what kind of partnerships we will have specifically in the sector of high-tech, agriculture, healthcare, education. That I think is much more important. And but certainly the first and symbolic step is going to repeal that Cold War amendment that we still have.
During his first term of Donald Trump, the United States promoted the energy independence. How do you think the new administration, will they try to influence the oil and gas market in Central Asia?
Well, I think that the traditional sector of U.S. interest in Central Asia, specifically Kazakhstan, I think is certainly the energy sectors, oil, gas, and I think that is going to be untouched, and certainly we will have pragmatic relations in that regard. The most important thing, I think, is just to explore different sectors of our partnership. Specifically, the raw minerals, raw materials is a very much important case that we need to explore on a win-win basis. And certainly, if we are going to provide the raw materials, it's also very important to have a technological transfer to Kazakhstan. And I think that is up to the government of both countries to discuss on mutual beneficial terms. And I think it's going to be a very much important process that we are going to have soon.
Can the new administration under the Donald Trump initiate radical changes in terms of relations with the European Union, and how it can affect the Kazakhstan's foreign policy?
Well, this is a very important question, and certainly the inauguration of Donald Trump as a president of the United States actually created an outcry in some European capitals and the European Parliament and Commission, because they need to redefine the tactical and strategical approach towards one of the biggest partners between Brussels and Washington. So I think it's very much on the agenda of the European Union, because the statements about the Greenland, etc., and certainly it created some outcry in Denmark, and as we know, it will have much more debates in European capitals on the presidency of Donald Trump. And it's not just related to Greenland, it's also related to NATO and how much Donald Trump is going to ask for NATO members in Europe to spend on their defense. So another one is the ongoing war in Ukraine, is whether it's going to stop or not, because it's directly related to the European Union and its relations to Russia, and indirectly certainly it will affect Kazakhstan, because European Union is the biggest trade partner for Kazakhstan, and that is why the relations between biggest partner on behalf of European Union and US, one of the biggest allies, strategic allies, is going to have indirect implications for Kazakhstan, but certainly on economic terms it will affect us as well.
We all know that Donald Trump is a strong advocate for trade wars with China, and China is our big key partner in this region. So how do you think US-China competition will affect us, Kazakhstan's economy?
US-China competition, or so-called rivalry as we name it, is a global issue, and it's not only linked to Kazakhstan, but the point is that we share the border with China, and China for us is a very much important partner, strategic partner in multiple spheres. So that is why I think it's certainly a matter of concern, but we shouldn't forget that US and China are biggest trade partners for each other. So I think, if I'm not wrong, the trade level, bilateral trade turnover last year was almost $700 billion between Beijing and Washington. So I think they are very much interested in themselves. So there will be a tactical trade barriers, tariffs, war, or competition, something like that. But I don't think that it's going to escalate to something from the cold to the hot confrontation in that regard. So everybody understands the stakes that are very high in both relations. For Kazakhstan, certainly, whether it takes Europe, European Union, or China, for middle power as Kazakhstan, I think very much there are pros and cons, but if you look at the pros, we are able to and have a capacity to navigate these complexities among the big nations, and as a middle power we have an experience of mediating different conflicts. But what more important is, we need to utilize this time to be a neutral ground, an effective ground for Chinese and American partners to invest into Kazakhstan and Central Asia region in general sense. Central Asia and Kazakhstan should be the area or the center for cooperation, not confrontation in this respect. So it's up to us now to provide necessary economic benefits and financial investment benefits to our different multi-vector partners. So that's, I think, is good timing for us to utilize this moment.
I've got one more last question. Do you think that Donald Trump will be able to maintain consensus within his party to implement all his foreign policy initiatives?
It's $1 million question. I think it's historically not easy for any U.S. president to maintain, sustain bipartisan unity in the White House, Senate, and the Congress itself. So I think it's up to Donald Trump and his team that certainly is going to be recalibrated alongside the time, and we certainly will see the much more personal foreign policy, personal domestic policy kind of decisions that will not be in the interest of the collective body in the U.S. government. So it's up to his team now, core team, that he's now ratifying and framing. But it's going to be a tough issue that should be discussed among them. But we need just to accept the fact that U.S. foreign policy is going to be much more interesting this maybe next 4 years.
Iskander, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
It was Iskander Kalbayev, foreign policy expert.